Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
All right, so we're diving into kind of a paradoxical situation today in Manipur, India, where you have the government pushing for free movement across the state.
Right.
But at the same time, you have a ton of resistance and clashes, especially from the Kuki tribes.
Absolutely.
It's a really interesting and complex scenario with a lot of history, so let's unpack it.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating, how free movement is something that we generally consider positive.
Totally, yeah.
But it's actually fueling tensions in a region that's already dealing with ethnic conflict.
Exactly.
Oh.
And we're talking about Manipur, which is a state in India where the Kuki tribes and the Meitei community have been clashing.
Right.
And things really escalated back in May 2023.
Yeah.
But to understand why the Kuki tribes are resisting this free movement initiative, we need to go deeper into their demand for a separate administration.
Yeah, think of it this way. For decades, the Kuki tribes have felt marginalized and underrepresented in Manipur's political structure. And they feel like their voices aren't being heard, their interests aren't being protected.
Yeah.
And this demand for a separate administration, a separate state, comes from that deep-seated feeling of being sidelined politically and culturally.
And it's not a new demand.
Right. No, not at all.
Our sources mentioned a memorandum from the WKCIC stating that this has been something they've been asking for since like the late 1940s.
Yes, absolutely. This demand has historical roots.
How?
They point to instances where development projects have been implemented without proper consultation with them or consideration of the impact on their lands and livelihoods. So they feel like their concerns have been consistently ignored, which leads to this call for self-governance.
And so this free movement initiative, even with its good intentions, they want to restore normalcy, get civilian travel going again between districts.
Sure.
It's seen by many Kukis as just another example of the government imposing its will without addressing their core concerns.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Kuki tribes see this as a way to force them to accept a status quo that they fundamentally disagree with.
Right.
And they view the government's efforts like using mine-resistant vehicles and security forces
to
escort buses as heavy-handed tactics that just completely disregard their desire for autonomy.
And the resistance has been very visible. We've seen the images, blockades, burning tires, women protesters confronting the security forces.
Right.
It seems like they're saying free movement on whose terms?
Exactly. It's about more than just physical movement.
Right.
It's about having the freedom to determine their own destiny, manage their own affairs, and protect their cultural identity.
Absolutely. But this demand for a separate administration, often referred to as Kuki land, is not without its complexities.
Right.
The Meitei community, the majority in the state, has concerns of their own.
Yeah, and they have their own historical narratives and grievances.
Right.
And they question why displaced people can't return home while talks are going on, because they fear that a separate administration would create further division and instability.
Right.
And some Meitei groups view this Kuki land movement as a threat to the territorial integrity of Manipur, particularly given the historical context of a unified kingdom in that region.
Right.
They also have concerns about how resources would be divided and how their own interests would be represented in a newly formed Kuki majority state.
So there's this complex web of historical claims, competing interests, security concerns.
Absolutely.
And then the violence that erupted in May of 2023, resulting in over 250 deaths, almost 50,000 people displaced, has only deepened the distrust and made finding a resolution even more challenging.
You're absolutely right. The violence was a turning point,
Yeah.
It brought all these simmering tensions to the forefront.
Yeah.
And it's a stark reminder that ignoring these underlying issues can have devastating consequences.
So where do we go from here?
Well,
And there's a glimmer of hope, I guess, with this suspension of operations agreement with the Kuki militant groups. But they are adamant about this separate administration demand before allowing free movement.
yeah.
Is there any middle ground?
Well, the key lies in dialogue and reconciliation, but it has to be a dialogue that genuinely addresses the root causes of the conflict.
Right.
Both the Kuki and Meitei communities need to feel secure, represented, and included in the decision-making process.
Yeah.
So this involves addressing issues of land rights, political representation, economic opportunities for all communities.
This deep dive really highlights how free movement is much more than just being able to travel freely.
Right.
It's about freedom from fear, freedom from marginalization, and freedom to have a say in one's own future.
Absolutely. And it raises that really important question.
Yeah.
Can you truly have free movement in a society where entire communities feel like their voices aren't heard,
Right.
their identities aren't respected, and their basic needs aren't met?
Yeah.
So the situation in Manipur really urges us to think deeply about this connection between individual freedoms and collective well-being, and how to build a society where everyone feels safe and empowered to move forward together.
Absolutely.
It's a tough question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Really appreciate you coming on.
It's been a pleasure.
All right, everybody, take care.
Bye.
We'll see you next time.
See.
Bye.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.